Hi, my name is Sydney Devereaux. I'm the Showgirl Astrologer on Instagram, and today I'm talking about the lunar partial eclipse that is taking place on September 17th at 7:34 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. You're going to want to check your time for wherever you are in the world. To determine whether an eclipse will have a particular effect on your life, you'll need to have some knowledge of your chart and the planets and points at particular eclipse degrees. The nodes sit at the 6th degree in cardinal signs, and the sun and moon are in the mutable 25th degree. With this lunar eclipse in Pisces, the mutable axis is most likely to be highly affected, so those with mutable risings will have a series of eclipses occurring at their angles. The mutable signs are Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. Eclipses affect on an axis and not just one house in the chart. Regardless of what axis this is for you, the effects of the eclipse will ultimately impact the houses where the sun and the moon rule as well. Speaking specifically to the mutable risings, we have Virgo and Pisces risings having this eclipse series affecting their 1st and 7th house axis, which is the axis of identity versus relationship. It's the axis of me versus you. Gemini and Sagittarius risings will have this eclipse series activating their 4th and 10th houses, which is the axis of home, family, ancestry versus external achievements and reputation, or the axis of mother versus father, or to keep it modern, the parental axis. You'll note here that I also have put up for all of the other rising signs what axis this will be affecting you as well, so take a pause and take a peek. In order for an eclipse to occur, the new or full moon needs to be within a range close to the nodes of the moon, which are points based on the intersection of the sun and moon's orbit. The closer the sun and moon are to the nodes will denote whether an eclipse is full or partial. This lunar eclipse in Pisces is a partial eclipse as is occurring further away from the nodes. Eclipses aren't necessarily rare events as they happen in pairs a couple times in a year. The pair comprise of what astrologers call eclipse season. It's when events can take a fated quality, and as one of our modern pillars of astrology, Chris Brennan coins, great endings and great beginnings can occur. He has a beautiful and brilliant episode on YouTube through the Astrology Podcast, tracking eclipses through time in order to understand what they do. And a big takeaway is that one cannot precisely predict what will happen during an eclipse, only the axis in which they occur. We must note here, though, that events that have occurred via the eclipse cycle don't necessarily have to take place exactly on the day of eclipse. It can happen a few days before, up to a couple weeks, and even a few weeks, even a month after, depending on the strength of the eclipse. I like to think of eclipses as fated time in course corrections, whether we like it or not. These occurrences are not things that we can control. Instead, this is a time of let go and let the universe do its thing. These periods of time are where very wild and unlikely events happen, the sorts of events that shift a person's trajectory in their life. Some traditions of astrology pay particular attention to where the nodes are, and another term for the north node is Rahu, the head of the dragon, and the south node is Ketu, the tail. The head directs and the tail follows. We go ahead, Rahu, leaving the past behind, Ketu. Evolutionary astrology points to the north node as where the soul is directing its energy towards, and the south node as the data we hold from previous lifetimes that inform us in our going forward. There are various advices to go forward, not forgetting the past, but instead taking what we've learned and plotting our way into what we may feel is like the great unknown. This eclipse has its nodes in Aries and Libra respectively. So the rulers of the nodes are Mars, being the ruler of the Aries north node, and Venus, being the ruler of the Libra south node. These are relationship planets. This is the will of one versus a more relating energy, which is Venus. And when we look at the relationships in the chart, we often look to how Venus and Mars interplay. Mars is a yang planet, and Venus is a yin planet, more receptive. I think it's noteworthy that during this eclipse that Venus and Mars are sitting in sign energies that are yang and yin respectively, creating a bit of a topsy-turvy energy overall. The rulers of the nodes are not an aspect to each other, which can mean that they have very different ideas of the ways that they want to behave and operate during this eclipse. So the North Node is pointing us collectively to more independence, freedom, and pioneering, a desire to protect what we feel is our homeland, our domain, and the South Node, a letting go of old patterns that may hold us as too obliging, too codependent, perhaps letting go of the ways in which we had unhealthy attachments to seeking harmony where harmony could not be obtained. Full moons in general are a time of letting go, and the full moon being in Pisces promises to have an emotional, imaginative, and dreamlike quality, especially with the moons applying conjunction to retrograde Neptune in Pisces, as Pisces is the dreamer, while Virgo is the analyst. That's that Virgo sun. Perhaps we're being asked to release the imaginations, dreams, and self-delusions that we're holding on that do not assist us in our evolution. I find it particularly interesting that for this eclipse, the ruler of the North Node in Aries is Mars in Cancer and will be squaring this nodal axis. Mars is in its fall in Cancer, not allowing it to act with all the dignity that it would like, and so it has to resource in different ways. And Mars in Cancer resources its will and action through its emotions and what it's feeling. This Mars squaring the nodes is ruled by a very sentimental and emotional, maybe almost depressed moon in Pisces that has just left a conjunction with Saturn, is applying a conjunction to Neptune. So there's a sobering, sombering, and like a deep well of oceanic feeling, which will have a sobering, maybe even really depressing quality to it. In evolutionary astrology, when a planet is square the nodes, it speaks to a part of ourselves that hasn't been integrated through past lifetimes and thus presents itself as a choice point in this one. Mars square the nodes speaks to unintegrated rage and anger and action that is in critical juncture and must be incorporated into our new choices going forward. We must find healthy ways to integrate our protective emotional rage into our path ahead. I think it's particularly striking that the topics of motherhood, child rearing, school violence, and the ideas around protecting our various homelands have been a central topic, particularly in the United States. During this eclipse, we must look at what other planets are doing at this time, paying special attention to those planets that are in direct contact with the nodes, the sun and the moon, or have particularly strong aspects to each other. And one of those such aspects is Mercury's application to a very tight opposition to a retrograde Saturn. Perhaps this opposition is frustrating circumstances that arrive and put a limit on what we're ultimately able to express and share around our ideas and communications. This could be a time of poor communication overall. Saturn in relation to Mercury via the opposition brings a very serious, sobering, and melancholic flavor to our contemplations and understandings, perhaps confronting us with the limits to the information we think we actually believe in. I think it's of note that in this chart, Saturn is the sign of Venus's exaltation, placing limits on what we consider ultimate love. And Venus is in the sign of Saturn's exaltation, where fairness, balance, and justice work to serve societal and cultural expectations. Perhaps it's that things are revealed in our relationships that are frustrating to communicate about and that something needs to change, be let go of in order for us to reclaim some sense of independence. But we don't have all of the resources to fully make corrections yet, or perhaps situations change far too quickly for us to be able to understand yet. It could be the rest of the eclipses in this axis through 2027 that will sort it out. So in time, we'll get our answers. A brief note here is that Mars will be in Cancer through November, dip into Leo, and then will go retrograde back into Cancer, where it will be through February 2025. While Mars is in Cancer, it will be ruled by the moon, which changes signs every 2.5 days, giving us a full roller coaster ride through the lens of what drives us, what brings us passion, what we get angry about, and what we take action in. Perhaps this roller coaster is the way of having us work out the kinks that this eclipse has put into our laps. Some of us, those with points connected to this eclipse, are in for a wild individual ride. However, collectively, we are all connected to these times of great endings and beginnings that will shape how we are able to live on this planet together. Pay close attention to these times. May whatever revelations you have and find be useful in your evolution. Ashe. I think I'll be back relatively soon to talk about the solar eclipse coming in October, but in the meantime, if you're interested in sitting with me for a reading to see where the eclipses may be hitting your chart, or a natal consultation, or various upcoming pivotal transits in your life, you can schedule with me by going to my website. Link is in the bio, or it's divinewithdevereauxastrology.com.